6:13, the Radio 2 Book Club choice is Thin Air by Michelle Paver. There is a chapter online which you've been able to look at for the last couple of weeks. Michelle, how are you?
I'm fine.
Oh, there you are. You're on that one there. Say again.
I'm fine, thanks, Simon.
Very good. We might need to get you just a little bit closer there. Matt, do you want to take over?
To this one?
Yeah, I reckon just put that one in there. I think
All
that's
right,
we're just making it up as we go
Is that
along there,
better?
Michelle. Yeah, very good.
Okay.
And I think it was Dark Matter, which was the last time that you were in. But anyway, before we go too further up this mountain, Matt, describe the book cover, please.
Yes, it's a great cover. It's mainly dark. It's dominated, though, by a snowy mountain peak in white and then picked out in green. The higher you go, the darker it gets. Thin Air by Michelle Paver.
And there's a quote at the bottom from Anthony Horowitz. However, we don't need to mention the quote because he was on the show last week.
Oh, fantastic.
So he was talking about Magpie Murders, and this time last week we said okay, and Michelle's coming, and then he said this. Right, you ready? If I can make this work.
I'm often asked to give cover quotes to books, and I'm a little reticent because I think you can overstretch yourself and be on too many books. But I read that book, Thin Air, last year. I loved it. I love a really good ghost story, and it's beautifully researched, and it's a lovely, enjoyable read, and it's very creepy too. So yeah, so it's a wonderful choice to have. I'm sure everyone will enjoy it a lot.
There you go. So we almost don't need to say anything else. So Michelle, thanks very much for coming in. That's been Michelle Paver talking about Thin Air. Anyway, but getting a thumbs up from Anthony counts for an awful lot. So take us to the Himalayas. Take us to 1935. Tell us the story here.
Yeah, well, it's the British Raj. It's India, the golden age of mountaineering, twilight of the empire. And my hero, Stephen, is on an expedition with 4 other Brits, and they're following in the footsteps of an earlier expedition that ended in tragedy, and they're out to climb Kanchenjunga, 3rd highest mountain in the world, biggest killer of them all. Stephen's desperate to reach the top, but as they climb higher, things start to happen that he can't explain. He ends up alone on the mountain. Only, is he alone? Is what he's experiencing altitude, or is the mountain haunted?
I don't know, is it?
Well, that's for the reader to find out,
see.
Simon.
Very, very clever. Now, I have to say I am ashamed to acknowledge that I had never heard of this mountain before. I thought I knew about the Himalayas, I knew about K2, and I knew about...
I hadn't heard
Everest,
of
but
Kanchenjunga. I hadn't heard of it. I mean, it's very, very well known in mountaineering circles, but I'm not a mountaineer. I confess that up front.
But you have climbed it.
No.
You've been on an expedition.
I've been on an expedition. I've retraced.
You could see it from a distance.
No, I actually did a bit more than that, Simon. I retraced the steps of the expedition on which I based the story, which took place in 1930, and so I trekked on foot for 8 days through the foothills towards it. And that sounds a bit gentler than it really was. It was going from about sort of 5,000 feet to nearly, over 15,000 feet.
Yeah, like I said, you climbed it. Come on, stop nitpicking. You could write a book. Yeah, that time I mounted. So, and it is a mountain which is a scary mountain for reasons that we'll come to, and you explain in your book. But is it a sacred mountain as well?
It is. I mean, the reason I chose it is that it is a sacred mountain. There's it's still believed to be a god on top. And what particularly appealed to me was that the mountaineers who tried to climb it in the 1930s, well, some of them died trying, and those that survived were scared of it. I mean, one of the toughest said that it's imbued with a blind, unreasoning hatred of the mountaineer, and it stands all on its own, and it's also quite a rich place for seeing yetis. So it's got all this, tradition of weird
and in that sense,
things.
the perfect place for a ghost story,
Perfect
a place where a mountaineer will doubt what he or she can see.
Absolutely.
Where you said there might be yetis and strange beasts. Anyway, and you start to imagine that you're seeing all kinds of things, and there's oxygen starvation and so on.
Yes, and is it are you hallucinating, or is there really something out there? And especially when the Sherpas do believe that there is something out there.
And 1935, we mentioned the fact there are 5 Brits, and it's quite a privileged bunch who are going up, and they're not that pleasant, are they? In some cases,
I think that's right. I have to say, I read a lot of the mountaineering memoirs of people who tried it, and a lot of them were rich because you had to be to pay 500 porters or whatever. Horribly racist, some of them, not all of them. So, I did have to sort of portray it as they were, and I couldn't make up some of it. I really couldn't. The attitudes to the people they called the coolies. I apologise for that, but that's that's what they were like.
It was the language of the time.
It was the language of the time.
And you've mixed real mountaineers and real stories with yours as well. So in a sense, the reader's thinking, I'm not quite sure what's real here anyway.
Oh, excellent. That's a really good point. I mean, if you know your mountaineering history, people will recognise names like Frank Smythe and Paul Bauer. And then, I've made up 2 entire expeditions, and they won't recognise Lyle or Cottrell because I made those expeditions up.
Matt, what did you make of Thin Air by Michelle Paver?
Yes, I really enjoyed this. This is one of those books where I sort of 10 pages in, you think, right, I'm really going to enjoy this. But it is deeply unsettling. There was one part I had to stop myself reading this on the way home, because when I was getting off the tube and going back through the park, there's a part of the park which is entirely dark, and that was an interesting journey home.
And what were you thinking?
I was thinking about, am I going to suddenly see some snow-encrusted man step out from nowhere? And none did, obviously, but it was yes, I found it a deeply unsettling book. There is a sequence, I'm not going to give anything away, obviously. There is a sequence involving a rucksack, which is hugely disturbing, and made me think about rucksacks quite a lot. What I'd like to ask you about is the effect that mountain sickness can have, that the effect of being at altitude has on you. Obviously, physically it has an effect on you, but mentally is what I'm more interested in, because that's what I thought was a driving theme in this book. Of we don't know what's going on, and also the central character isn't sure whether he can trust what he's thinking, what he's seeing.
Yeah. Well, firstly, I'm delighted that it scared you. That was the whole point. Yes, the effect of Thin Air. I'm really annoyed to say that I can't speak from first-hand experience, because I haven't suffered from mountain sickness. I've been, high up, nearly 15,000 feet, and I just haven't. That's not because I'm fit or anything, but someone on my party, when we were climbing towards Kanchenjunga, did, and she, obviously being a writer, I sort of grilled her a bit when she felt better, and she said she had images that came to her of people who she knew were dead from her past, and she's sort of coming at her, and all sorts of really disturbing things. And a lot of people in mountaineering memoirs have talked about seeing a third person climbing with them, or someone from their past. Really weird.
So it's like a hallucinogen.
Weird hallucinations, absolutely. And there's someone who was stuck up a mountain in the Alps, was hallucinating seeing strange sort of cowled creatures, covered in black, coming out of the ice to carry him away. Really horrible hallucinations. So very fertile.
And bearing that in mind, I'm sure you weren't that keen to get mountain sickness then. You were quite happy just to interview someone who has had it.
In a way, no. I was actually quite disappointed, because I do prefer to have experience. I mean, I have experienced a blizzard, alone in a tent up a mountain, and that's how I can write about it, because the whole aim of doing the research is to make the reader feel they're there.
We'll talk with the...
Nice.
Sorry, yes, it would be nice. The listener review is coming next to discuss Thin Air by Michelle Paver after this. Thin Air by Michelle Paver is the very latest. Was it always going to be a ghost story, Michelle? I mean, you could have gone up the mountain and told a similar tale in a different way, but did you always know what it was going to be?
It was always going to be a ghost story, yeah. I mean, I had the idea at 3 a.m. one morning, looking at memoirs of mountaineering, and I thought, ghost up a mountain, that's got to be done.
That's the way it has to be. Okay, here come our listener reviews, and who knows what they're going to say. I don't know what they're going to say either.
Okay.
So here's Emily Holden in Basingstoke, first of all. Emily.
I was really quite surprised at how lovely the book looked when it first arrived. It is an exciting thing to hold, and it made me very excited to want to read it. I really enjoyed it from the very beginning, so I think the sort of sense of foreboding that is created quite quickly in the book is really exciting, and the kind of dread that you feel as you read on, and you know something's going to go wrong, and the atmosphere it creates is fantastic. It sort of reminded me a little bit of Joseph Conrad's Heart of Darkness. As it progressed, it was just a really great page-turner, and I found the main character very sympathetic and very easy to identify with, which I think really helped. Just a really gripping, enjoyable read.
As comparisons go, that's not bad, is it?
I am absolutely thrilled. Yeah.
Okay, there's one for your PR team. That's Emily Holden in Basingstoke. Next up, Martin Thrower from Chippenham.
This book is not a subject that I would necessarily have chosen myself off the top of my head to read. and I have to be honest, it did take me a while to get into it. But once I did get into it, I found the story particularly well described. The scene setting and the character setting was very good, even if I have to be honest, I didn't particularly find the characters all that appealing. Oddly, at certain times I felt a certain sort of lassitude come over me, and that made it actually difficult to continue reading in a long period of time. But once I got through that, and certainly the way this story built towards the conclusion was very good.
Sounds like he had some mountain sickness of his own.
Wow, that's amazing.
Just reading the book.
Yeah.
That's Martin Thrower. So final reviewer, Hannah Lewis in Dorset.
This is not a genre of fiction that I would normally read. However, it is not your normal ghost story. The setting and context of the story, a group of men attempting to conquer a Himalayan mountain in the 1930s, was both fascinating and thrilling. Here, the description of their journey and events that followed were well written, and the language used began to create an air of mystery and intrigue. Throughout the story, you are unsure whether the events are as a result of an overactive imagination of Dr. Pierce, altitude sickness, or something more sinister. Unfortunately, I found the ending a bit of a letdown, as it all ended rather abruptly. However, I would recommend this read to anyone, like myself, with an interest in adventures in other countries, or even a good mystery.
I still have an image of Matt walking through the park, which I know the park he's walking through, as it goes pitch black and wondering what's going to be jumping out at him. And because ghost stories have the power to do that.
They can do. I mean, that's the aim. That's what I try to do, I'm afraid, is scare the reader.
And what did you make of what you heard from Emily, Martin and Hannah?
I was really, really pleased. I mean, I was thrilled with Emily that she got that feeling of dread right from the start. And Martin, I think, yes, I quite agree that they're not very sympathetic, some of those characters, but they are the 1930s mountaineers. And Emily, the fact that it's not the sort of genre that she normally likes, but she did for the most part enjoy it. I'm really, really thrilled with that.
Do you know? And just to pick up on one thing, finally, it is a beautiful book. It's a short book. You were saying it's about 50,000 words. It's hardback. It feels as though you can read it overnight, maybe over a couple of days.
Yes.
It looks great. You can see all the artwork online. If you go to the book club pages, everything is there. What are you working on next, Michelle?
Well, I've got two projects, which, yes, one is a sort of trilogy. I've just come back from a trip to Alaska, and last year I was in Siberia.
Cold.
Yes, out of Siberia last year as well. So that's for that one. And then the other one is completely different, a sort of gothic thing set in somewhere in England.
Michelle, always good to have you on the show. Thank you very much indeed for coming in.
Great pleasure, Simon. Thank you so much.
Radio 2 Book Club choice has been Thin Air by Michelle Paver. Read a chapter while it's up there. You can read chapters of all our chosen books, bbc.co.uk/Radio 2. And tomorrow, round about this time, we'll announce our brand new Radio 2 Book Club choice.